participants on this webinar despite of load shedding, or is it because of load shedding? Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. So lovely to see so many people in the room with us today, and so excited to be sharing this hour with you. We've got some amazing panelists with us today who are all walking this tough journey alongside you, going through the same battles, picking up the same battle scars as you all are. So I am extremely excited to have this conversation. Quick one, feel free to use the chat to make observations, network, say hello, anything else that you want to add in there. And then we're going to use the Q&A box for some really important questions. So I intend to have a bit of a discussion with the panel. Feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box while the panel is deliberating and sharing some insights. And then we'll try and leave some time at the, oh no, load shedders. You have 5 minutes and then load shedding. I hope you've got backup, Trishka. And then at the end of the chat with the panelists, we'll then move along and we'll get to Q&A. We really want to target this conversation. So Hanru, in the background, if I can please ask you to release that first poll. We really want to try and target this, or the content of this webinar, to where you are at in your fundraising journey. So you would have seen a poll pop up on the screen in front of you, asking you where you are at in your process. So please do us a favor and add a response in there. It's easy, it's multiple choice. Let us know where you are in your journey, and we'll then try and take that into account as we work through this webinar. All right. Panelists, I know you're hiding from us for the moment. Will you please switch on your videos so I can introduce you to our attendees today? There we go, lovely people. And I see Mark is joining us. There we go. Right, okay, I'm going to start with the beautiful Jess Main. Jess Main, please tell us who you are and what you're here to tell us about today.
Thanks, Mel. Jess Main Buchenpoel, managing partner of AIH Capital, and AIH Capital is a Black woman-owned private equity firm. We are quite unique in that most private equity funds are owned by a few individuals. And in addition to myself and my fellow managing partner, Cindy Kuyana, our private equity fund has a parent company, AIH, which has 53 Black women shareholders, mainly chartered accountants. We are also a generalist fund, and we invest in medium-sized companies that have a track record and that are shown to be market leaders in the specific area that they operate in. We have successfully raised 350 million at our second close, and this was raised, thanks Mel, from 2 pension funds, and we are now looking to raise a further 450 million to take us to a target fund size of 800 million. We are very excited that we've announced our first deal in the asset manager Future Growth. Our legals have been concluded and it's subject to some conditions precedent.
Welcome, Jess Main, and can I say again, congratulations. I know I'm biased, but I think I speak for all of us that it is so cool to see women doing these amazing things in the way that you and your team have done it. And what a first deal to announce with Future Growth, and what an example you are setting for all of us out there in terms of just all the good that you're doing for gender empowerment in this country. So congratulations, and we are so pleased to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
Right, now we have got Mark van Wyk with us, who, Mark, I'm loving the jacket. I'm loving the representation there of the Infra Impact brand.
I have to make use of the opportunity.
Please tell us more about you and why you're here today.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. So Mark van Wyk, managing partner, co-managing partner at Infra Impact Investment Managers, co-managing partner with Mona Idas. So we also came off the SAFCA Fund Manager Development Program last year. And out of that program, we launched our fund, our mid-market infrastructure fund, where we've reached our first close, having raised 250 million rand to date on our journey to R1 billion of final close. We also have made 2 initial investments in our fund already and looking to close our 3rd one now. So I think we're here to kind of like, shed some of the horror stories of fundraising and the joys and the pleasures of fundraising. So thank you for having us.
I'm so glad you ended that off with the joys and the pleasures of fundraising. We tend to focus on the war stories, don't we? And
Yeah.
rightly so. It's not an easy journey, but I'm glad you're being positive about it.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, Avi, you join us today from Sunstone Capital, and you're also the only one wearing a proper jacket and a collared shirt today. That's impressive.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm wearing pajama bottoms, so we're good. Maybe just a quick introduction. My name's Avi Gordon. I'm involved in 2 Section 12J funds, one being Sunstone Capital, 2 Decentral Energy Capital. For those of you who were around during the 12J hump, you got a lot of emails around February. We specialized in going to the retail market, so dealing with private wealth, retail investors, open to the public. We actually have closed both funds, fully deployed and committed. One fund already has raised a tranche of debt from the IDC. The other fund's in the process of raising its first tranche of debt. I guess also here to share some of the fun stories of dealing with retail investors.
Fantastic. So glad to have you, Avi. And you'll see already there in the Q&A box, there's a question around, differentiating around all the different participants in that investor space or that LP space. So I think your contribution there from a retail perspective and high net worth individual private wealth client based perspective will be invaluable to our audience today. All right, Hanru, please can you close or end the poll for us and show us who's with us today? There we go. I hope you can all see the results there. But it looks like the majority of the guys with us today are at fund idea stage, yet to launch a fund. We've got a couple in there who have launched with thesis and strategy, are starting to build a pipeline, and then some of them are here launched with some capital raised and or deals completed. I also see that's a nice percentage there, and you've successfully built a fund before and you're looking at your next one. Nice to see you here too. And if you've got any interesting observations to add to this discussion, please use the chat function. And if you're very brave at the end of this discussion, why not raise your hand and we'll pull you into the panel if you've got any insights to share. I'm sure our participants will love you for it. But I'm really pleased that so many of you guys in the early phase has joined us today, because capital raising is a journey. It's a marathon. It's not a 100-meter race. So it's really pleasing to see you here today, because I'm sure that it will equip you well for the marathon and make sure you have all the right skills and tool sets in hand to move you forward in that marathon. Andrew, I know there's a second poll out there, and that really is just for our interest that we're putting it out there. If you would just please let it run in the background, and we'll get the discussion going with our panel. So panelists, what we wanted to discuss today really is the art of capital raising, and given that so many of our managers are sitting in that fund ideation space, looking to raise a fund, I think a lot of our focus today is probably going to be around this first hurdle in capital raising. And in capital raising, we generally refer to 5 hurdles. We talk about that first one, which is, how do I get that first meeting, making contact? The second hurdle is, what do I do in that first meeting to ensure I get a follow-on meeting? The third hurdle is doing well enough in the follow-on meeting so that you can get to a due diligence process. And the fourth hurdle is doing well enough in that due diligence process so that I actually can get capital allocated to me from an investor. And then that final hurdle is doing so well once you've got that capital that you, in terms of deployment and reporting back, that when you're ready to start your second fund, the LP is willing to follow you. So maybe I'm going to start with you, Mark. I'm picking on you because you happen to be to the left of my screen. I know this is the biggest question these guys have. How did you identify your target investors? How did you matchmake? And how did you get them not to ghost you? How did you get them to give you a first meeting?
Yeah. So I think, Melania, I think maybe obviously my background is slightly different in that, you know, I've previously managed like, you know, multi-billion rand funds before, and I had some relationships with some of the LPs, but not my LPs currently, I've never had relationships before. And, you know, it was getting that first meeting. And I think the first step was obviously to kind of get to know as to who you want to talk to and why, and make sure that your proposition that you put on the table is relatively differentiated from the peers in the market. Is that you kind of like want to get onto the buy list or like excite them initially. And the funny story was that, you know, the first time we met, you know, our first LP was, you know, he ghosted us for like close to 6 months. Like, you know, even though I kind of like knew his colleagues very well, we just never could get an opportunity to speak to this person. And we knew that they were going to attend the SAFCA conference at Spear. And we kind of like made an oath that we're not going to leave Spear until we see this person. So we were basically shadowing this person all the way, and eventually couldn't like, you know, run away, and managed to get him into a side coffee shop and pitched him immediately. Like we were in Stellenbosch, we didn't like, you know, we went before the time to print our deck in Stellenbosch and make sure we put it back to Spear. And that's kind of like how it was tenacious. And fortunately for us, it worked out. So I do think, you know, the long and short story on my side was that, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, how long you've been in the industry. And yes, you do have a reputation in terms of people knowing what you can do. But whenever you're starting out on your own, it's almost like you're starting off a zero back again. And it's to make sure that you keep those relationships fresh, and to make sure that your proposition you put on the table is credible and competitive relative to your peers.
Sure, Mark, you ambushed your first investor. You stalked your first investor, and then you ambushed your first investor. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's tenacious. I think you deserve that first investment, Mark.
Thanks.
But you touched on a very important point, and maybe just, man, if I can throw this your way, that point around targeting and differentiating yourself. So finding an intro point or something that gets that conversation with the investor going. So I assume you've had a very similar experience to Mark. Perhaps you were a bit more classy in your approach, Jesmay. Please do share.
Firstly, I've taken a tip from Mark, so now I'm really looking forward to the next AFCA conference in Paarl at the end of May. And I'll be using Mark's playbook. So we first determined that what type of investors we wanted to approach, and those were institutional investors such as pension funds and development finance institutions. And on our differentiator, we are a Black woman-owned private equity fund investing in medium-sized companies with a track record. We have also implemented our ESG management information system that the IFC helped capacity build for us. And we're grateful that we could engage the IFC around this, so we can demonstrate to our investors, in particular the DFIs, that we have a fully fledged ESG management information system spanning across the investment phase, from deal screening to due diligence to legals and to post-investment management. We didn't want a spray and pray approach where we're speaking to all and sundry in the market, because that takes a lot of time as well. So we were select in who we speak to, people where we felt we have relationships, and also where we felt that our value proposition fits in line with the LP's investment mandate. And we were fortunate to have been selected for the Rescura Emerging Market Funds Management Program. Through that, Rescura did a rigorous due diligence on us and introduced us to our two pension funds who formed our first and second investors. And with the second investor, it was easier to come on board, given that Rescura had conducted a thorough due diligence on behalf of the first investor. And with the second investor, the relationship was in parallel via Rescura and via our own relationship.
Fantastic. So you didn't pray and spray. You were much more classy in your approach. You actually got an asset consultant to due diligence you and then introduce you to investors, which is fantastic, because we're going to touch on that briefly around the due diligence process. But I assume that just going through that due diligence process with Rescura, by the time you got to the investor, you knew exactly what type of questions you were going to get, and you were well prepared to answer them.
Yes, and they did. There were a lot of things we needed to tick off, having a range of policies in place, and some of it felt onerous for us as a small private equity fund, but we obliged and went through the preparation of satisfying all the requirements.
Fantastic. Okay, so I can see on the poll, you guys don't yet have the privilege, maybe Hanru, in that poll for us and flip it up on the screen, but I can see that a lot of you are going, I don't even know how to identify my investors. And then the second biggest one there, once I've identified them, I actually don't even know how to make contact with them, and they're ghosting me, and we're getting no responses after our first meetings, and we actually don't even know how to get through the due diligence process because we're not getting through these due diligence processes. So I think it's common themes that are coming out here. So maybe Avi, why don't you give us a sense? You're more involved in that retail space. So give us a sense of how you got to the investors that you targeted and why you targeted those investors.
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, happy to share. I think we had quite an interesting iterative process, which is probably worth noting. I think when we first started out, there was a lot of hype, and we maybe did a bit of a spray and pray approach, to be honest. Very quickly, though, I would say within, I don't know, I guess the first month of being on the road and really trying to work it out, we had an interesting process whereby engaging with investors actually helped shape us, and we became a lot more clear on how we were going to position ourselves in the market, what we stand for, what we're looking to achieve. We were then able to whittle down, and refine, okay, we're looking for distributors with a certain number of clients. And we basically started applying Pareto principles, saying it's an 80-20 rule. We know 80% of our money is going to come from 20% of our client base. And I wrote down a list of the 20 ideal wealth partners who I thought would be right for us. And that was the first step, right? Just understanding who you are, get a real sense of identity, what your product's going to look like, who it's going to speak to, and how it's going to speak to them. Once we had that short list, the next step is just to be relentless, and that's the answer. I mean, there's videos that went around on the group of us pacing around the office, doing phone calls at all hours of the night, non-stop for months on end, and there is no shortcut to that. If they ghost you, you've got to keep at it. Keep emailing them. I mean, we booked unnecessary flights. I'd send them a mail and say, "Hi, Investor X, I know you're based in Cape Town. I'm actually down for a meeting. Would it be possible to stop past for a quick coffee and run you through our pack?" I didn't have another meeting. I wanted to meet them. And what was interesting is those relationships was quite disheartening off the bat, because you feel like you're getting nowhere. But there were relationships that lasted and still last for years. And what's really interesting is as you become more and more clear and your investors get more comfort around you, they start referring you to other people, like-minded investors, like-minded distributors who understand you. So I guess my approach is first figure out who you are, be authentic about it, be relentless about it, deliver, drive them mad. And yeah, I mean, that's probably the retail space. I definitely can't comment on the DFI space, but that was my experience.
Listen, I don't know what Jasmine and Mark are hearing, but I'm hearing the same messaging. Be relentless. They don't want to see you, make them want to see you. Find a reason and don't give them any opportunity whatsoever to back out. And be prepared to hear a no 5 times in a row before you get a yes.
And Mel, just to add on, just to add on to that, that often is your differentiator with an investor. They're batting everyone every day. They're getting 100 emails just like yours, 100 phone calls just like yours. You've got to get it to the point where they're like, it's actually going to be more convenient for me to have a 30-minute coffee and hear what this is about than keep on receiving emails from this person. I mean, you really do need a push. And that's a differentiator in and of itself.
Okay, so what you're saying to us is the pool is big. You need to make yourself stand out. You need to be the fish that doesn't go away, that the guys can no longer avoid. And that in itself will show the tenacity. And I think it's such an important point. And we touched on this in our previous webinar, where I said to Langa Madonko from Summit Fund, everybody's calling you an overnight success. He said, yeah, 5 years of night. Because that is essentially what it is. But I guess if you can withstand 5 years of night, you can withstand 10 years of fund life.
Yeah, sounds right.
Right, okay, so common themes coming through here. The one question that I didn't hear answered, which I think a lot of the guys are asking, is how do you even find these LPs? Is there a list somewhere out there that you can go and ask question? How do you even know where to look for these LPs so you can see whether their mandate speaks to your mandate? Mark, where did you find yours? How did you get to know them? How did you get to target them?
Yeah. So I think so. Google is amazing, eh? So I think what we did was so we invest in 4 subsectors: so waste, water, energy, and digital infrastructure. And so we knew that our proposition needed to fit in the mandate of these different clients. And so we started looking at other funds similar to ours, or maybe slightly different, that managed to get allocations from certain LPs, and then started approaching those LPs directly. And we got information like, for Google. We've also drawn up, obviously, like the FSCA, the old FSB, had a list of all different funds in the country. I managed to get hold of that list. There's Batseta, and then there's the IRF, as like industry association and bodies, and then just cold called, just got numbers and cold called, got email addresses and sent emails, and that's kind of like been our route to get to people that we didn't have relationship with before.
That sounds about right. I mean, Jasmine, do you have any to add?
On the local market, first, on the institutional side, there are well-known DFIs and pension funds. So then it was a matter of, is there a fit between our fund mandate and their requirements? Would they fund emerging fund managers? And also, where are they in their allocation process? So we've reached out to people that we know who are, whether they'd be asset consultants or somehow closer to those funds to help set up our meetings. And then on the international side, we're part of the WEMI incubator program for women-owned private equity funds, which is held by SAFCA and and MIDA, a USAID agency. And that's been an excellent incubator to be part of, both on the technical side, assisting us with pitches, and then introducing us to American potential investors.
Super, thanks, Jasmine. Avi, any others to add?
Yeah, maybe just a little bit more on the retail side. I think it's worth noting you don't need 100 distributors. You need one or two of the right ones. So, there's all these events that take place. You just make yourself heard, be on platforms, be available, be out there. And when you're in meetings with someone, and when you find someone who likes your story and understands your product and wants to get behind you, they might not be able to invest. It might be at the wrong life cycle. But what you can do is say, listen, who do you know? Can you introduce me? And, I had one distributor who actually, first of all, invested quite a bit with us. But secondly, took me to like 5 meetings at various other firms just because I asked. And you don't know if you don't try. And often there, when you're in a meeting and there's a name drop and they say, oh, well, this firm, take it down. Afterwards, bomb them a mail and say, hi, Avi, it was great to chat to you. By the way, you mentioned this firm. Do you have a contact there, someone I could share a deck with? Those kinds of things go a long way. That's my experience.
Yeah, Avi, that's such an important point, and you actually mentioned it earlier. You said investors can be your biggest champions. And I've really heard that, because you might just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Not necessarily a bad fit, but just the wrong place at the wrong time. And the industry is small, and these LPs all know each other. So that conversation goes both ways. Make sure you treat all LPs equally, or they will talk amongst themselves. But use the LP conversation not just for the benefit of potentially getting an investment from that particular limited partner, but potentially getting you an introduction to an alternate limited partner who becomes your investor. That's massively powerful. All right, so guys, there were a whole bunch of names that got thrown out there. If it's not clear to you already, SAFCA, the industry body in the country, has a membership portal, and while the private side of the membership portal isn't open to everybody, the public side actually has a list of all SAFCA members, and it not just gives you contact emails and contact numbers, it also tells you whether that fund is allocating or not, and gives you a brief description of that fund of funds mandate. So I think we've got it. Google is your friend, research is your friend, and ensuring that you treat all LPs equally in the hope of getting additional, not in the hope, in asking for additional introductions to other LPs who might take you on board is key. Okay, I love it. I love it. Right. So I hope it's clear to all of us where we can find these LPs. Now, we had a big discussion the last time we met around that first meeting, right? Now you're in the first meeting. What do you do before that first meeting? Do you send them as much information as possible? Do you send them a pitch deck? Do you send them a one-page teaser? What do you do once you're in the room? Do you present your entire pitch? Do you allow them to interrupt you with questions? How do you manage that engagement? And what do you do once you've left the room to make sure that you don't get ghosted? Mark, big question.
Yeah, like I said, that first meeting was kamikaze-like, and but we did arrive there with a deck, and we had an abridged format of a deck because there's no way we're gonna sit in the coffee shop and go through 30 slides. I think I can remember from our presentation skills, trading with the SAFCA program is care, know, believe, do. And so, we kind of sold that very quickly. We only had 30 minutes in the break. And I think before we left, we made sure what we wanted them to do. We're giving them evidence in terms of what we're capable of and what we care about, and make sure that we get a follow-up meeting before we left in terms of what's the next steps, and whether there's interest or not. So we were fortunate enough that we were we got we weren't ghosted for the second meeting, and we got a process starting on that day. So that's kind of like what the process that we've been following, especially in the first meeting. Obviously, we became a little more sophisticated subsequently, but yeah, that's different to the first one.
Mark, you know, when we had our first session, we had the missing link. We had the missing link as one of our panel members, and it was mentioned. It was mentioned that care, know, believe, do. Your presentation has to follow a pattern. You've got to get the person sitting across the desk from you to care about having the conversation with you. So you've got to think very carefully about what do you use as your initial catch point to make sure that that person is interested in listening to you for the next 30 minutes. Then you've got to use the opportunity to tell them exactly what they need to know in order to translate that fact that they already care about you into the third point, which is a belief in you. A belief in that this conversation is worth their time and their effort. And if you get those 3 steps right and you troll them in, then the 4th step is the deal clincher. Don't think they know by osmosis what you want from them. Tell them what you want from them, and then make it so that they cannot move left or right from that little what you want from them box that you've created for them. Jesmaine, did you experience it in the same way, or did Mark just get lucky?
A variation. I'll give my variation. So we were fortunate in the WEMI Incubator program to have the opportunity for a pre-pitch session, a safe place where we could do our pitch and get feedback before we did the pitch in the real world. And there was good feedback for us. For instance, emphasize you've already done your second close, and the LPs who've invested you have successfully completed a due diligence on you. You've announced your first deal, which is in a reputable and long-established asset manager in South Africa. And then while we are a first-time fund, we've emphasized that as a team, we have a successful track record of working together for on to 15 years now via our parent company, AIH Investment Holdings, and we've done deals in AIH that we're proud of, and we've done that as a team. We also found that aesthetics matter, so we got a design company to help us on the formats and layout. And in the pitches, you will get questions. So we'd send the pitch deck beforehand, go through it and spend time internally on our dry run on how we run through the material. And then questions will come up, and now then project managing and making sure we're going back to different organizations we pitched to with the questions that they wanted responses to, and then with the request for the follow-on meeting.
Okay, so again, a little bit more classy than the coffee shop approach that Mark aspires towards, where he ambushes people, but at least he gets the messaging pattern right. I love that. Aesthetics matter. It matters how you show up. So spend time in thinking about how you show up. And I guess it's just a measure of respect, showing the LP that you've actually put time, effort, energy, and thought into this. You're not expecting them to read a presentation with, I'm getting a little bit older, peeps, so that I have to do this when I'm reading it. Or that I can't see. Guys, I learned this early on in my career by accident. I was marking up a document for one of the analysts on my team, and I sent him back markups in a PowerPoint slide, and I used red font. And I couldn't understand why this analyst was not changing and making the markups that I was insisting that he should be making. Turns out the analyst was colorblind. There's so many things to consider in your pitch. Have you thought about it? Have you thought about how it comes across? Have you thought about the fact that it's the 10th time that that particular LP is having coffee with an emerging manager who is desperate for funding. So thank you for bringing that into the conversation, Jasmine. It actually does matter, gentlemen. Just saying. Right. Okay. Avi, how did it go for you?
Yeah, look, Mel, I keep going third, and there's a lot of insights shared before, but I'll try and give my piece. Again, I guess I always approach these meetings in quite a specific manner. You know, there's kind of three objectives I have in a meeting, right? One is to build credibility. So the way we present or what we do and what we offer is very important. And when considering that, if you put too much information, you'll often find that if your presentation's been shared with more than one party, there's someone who sees it who's just like had a bad day and they're quite keen to rip things apart. So you want to keep enough in that presentation that it's exciting, but not so much that they can tear it apart before they even meet you. So you don't want them to come loaded with 5 questions based on some arbitrary facts. You want to keep it to the core of what you're trying to achieve, build credibility in that space, why you think it'll work, and make sure that any talking points that might arise are areas that you're very comfortable talking to in the meeting. So the first is to build credibility. The second point would be to build rapport. You're dealing with people and you need to have a relationship with them and they need to feel comfortable with you. So when you're engaging with someone for the first time, make sure you're not just reading slides off a screen, that you're actually talking to them. And as much as it's important to talk, it's important to listen, to really understand them. And that leads on to my third point, which is to understand their lever points. As you say, this LP's met with 10 emerging fund managers. They know what irritates them every time in a meeting. They've got 5 questions that they want to ask you. It doesn't matter who you are. From the minute you walk in, they know I'm going to ask them these 5 questions. If Avi gets 5 out of 5, we're having another coffee. So sometimes it's worthwhile digging into them and saying, what's really important for you? Like, what do you like to see? I know I've presented you with quite a broad feel of what I'm doing. You know, what are your areas of interest or concern? And note them. And my response and my advice would be, that should be your follow-up meeting. So when you segue into a second meeting, you're saying, okay, cool. These are all the points. I'd really like to address them in a detailed manner. Would you be happy for me to send you a mail? I'll do it in the next day or 2. I'll get it out to you. And maybe we can set up a follow-up, a 30-minute chat, just so I can run you through it once you've had a chance to look through it. So there's a commitment device that they're committing to meeting you next week. They're buying in because, remember, you're basically saying to them, I'm interested in your problems. I'm answering your questions. So there's already buy-in off the bat. It's very hard for someone to say, well, these are my 5 things I care about. He's going to answer them. I'm not interested. So those are the kind of hooks that work, at least in a retail space. Again, can't comment on, I guess, the more complex deals. But yeah, that's from my side.
Listen, it's such a powerful point you're making. And Avi, I promise to put you first next time. I just want to say, you wouldn't know that you last in the row with all of these thoughtful elements insights that you're coming up with. But I think it's such an important point that you make because it's really about the person. An LP isn't some foreign object sitting there, some never shall he or she be touched or understood. An LP is a person, whether it's a development finance institution or whether it's a institutional investor or a retail investor. At the end of the day, it's a person sitting across the desk from you. And their mandates might differ slightly in terms of what they can and cannot do and how they follow their processes. But at the end of the day, it is about establishing that rapport with that person, getting that person to believe in you enough to make you fit the mandate and giving them enough to help them to make you fit the mandate. All right, so I'll let you go first before I get to the questions. Just quickly touch on the DD process. You've gone through the meetings now. You've ensured you've got a second meeting. How do you best prepare for that DD process? Because by the time you get into that DD process, these guys have an expectation that you're ready. You're ready to go through that process and you're ready to go through it at 100 kilometers an hour. How do you prep for that?
Look, Mel, I actually should have gone third on this one. But I think an interesting insight is 2 things. One is generally, especially if you're a startup fund manager, you know, you're just getting into the game, you probably haven't got the most beautiful DD pack. And as much as it would be nice to say the guidance is have a beautiful furnished DD pack on day 1, I don't know how practical that is. So, and as much as that would be good advice, I think it's probably not such great advice. What is practical and what might be helpful is to understand going into something, have it in the back of your mind. What happens when I get there? Let's say I'm dealing with a massive LP and they say, okay, cool. Well, here's 15 points that you need to address and send us your whole pack. And now you're like, whoa, well, I'm just starting this. What really matters is understanding your resources and team. If you're a one-man show, you're going to need assistance and support. You could have the most beautiful product in the world, but if you can't package it well, it's not going to get through credit and it's not going to go through IC. So if you really want something to work, that's where you need to take pride. If you're an excellent, attentive to detail person and that's your nature, great. I'm sure you can do it on your own. If you've got the right experience, qualification, background, all of that. But if you don't, that's the one area you shouldn't skimp on, because you can do all the work in the world getting them to love you and they can really appreciate you and they can sponsor you and take you to the next level. But if they don't have something really strong to present to a senior partner, you're not going to get it across the line. So I would say go get the support you need there.
So that's such a valuable point, Ari. So what you're saying is you are so close. You are so close to raising that capital, banking the house on it now by getting external people involved to get you through that process may well just be a calculated risk worth taking, given how close you are to raising the capital.
Absolutely. I mean, you'll run the numbers and it'll make sense 10 out of 10 times. If you have that internal capability, great. But if you don't kid yourself, because you're going to waste all the work you've built.
Got it. Jess May?
Thanks, Mel. I'll answer the question in two phases. So the first phase is the DD process of our two initial investors before we started doing deals. And with them, so there was a host of policies that we needed to put together, and you'd have your key policies of your investment policy. And we spent a lot of time on our investment policy. And then on some of the other policies, we borrowed templates from bigger firms, but then we were very rigorous in tailoring it to ourselves, because we didn't want a Rolls-Royce policy for, ourselves being maybe a smaller car. And also we're very mindful that in your policies, if you put that you're going to do various things and have various meetings, once the DD happens, if you're not complying with that, it means you're non-compliant. So spending time making the policies fit for purpose to your organization while still having the policies in place. And then we used a good service provider to draft our LPA and our various partnership agreements, which forms part of the DD. So we know that we use the highest standards in the industry for those legal documents. Going forward, the DDs that will be conducted, because now we've taken several deals to our IC, and with the one deal we publicly announced. So we have all the minutes of our IC meeting, and we also have an experienced company secretary who does our minutes. We have our IC papers that have been submitted, and for some of the deals, the due diligence documents, and we know that we feel comfortable that we've done that adequately, because the LPs that come on now will want to have sight of that too.
Fantastic. So again, a bit more of a sophisticated approach. And I guess what helped you, Jess Main, is you had the infrastructure of running that business previously with your team members. So you had a little bit more substance around how you were approaching your due diligence from a process perspective. But you begged, stealed, and borrowed as well, and you were clever in the process. So where you did beg, steal, or borrow, you made it so that it looked like it was always yours, which is incredibly important.
And it was also making it look like it's ours, because we didn't want it to be too onerous and cumbersome and too sophisticated. We wanted it to fit where we are as an organization.
Exactly. So there's nothing wrong with using others, those who've gone before you, blueprints, but be honest about where in the process you are. Because the problem with putting forward a policy that you can't meet is it's going to be flagged in the DD. So in the due diligence, the guys are going to go, ooh, your policy says you've got X, Y, and Z, and then you have to open and say, actually, I don't. But this was a very cool policy, so I went and borrowed it from somebody else, and I didn't bother to amend it. So, very important point. Nothing wrong with sharing is caring. This industry cares, this industry shares. But if you are going to borrow, adjust and amend to fit your purpose. Right. Okay, Mark.
Yeah, so I think from a DD point of view, obviously there's various different phases of it. So some investors got different degrees in terms of how they go about doing their due diligence. And I think the first actually port of call, first impression that you can make to a potential investor is the detailed completion of the DDQ. And the consistency in terms of responses in the DDQ, together with setting up a data room up front that you can share with as many of with your potential investors, and then also making sure that you've got the same information for all of them. So we kind of initially we were falling over ourselves in terms of do we have to create a separate one for each one, or do we just have one generic data room where all the information is included into it? And we will then answer specific or add specific additional information that is not in the standard DDQ, which we beforehand started working on the ILPA standard DDQ, making sure that we can at least cover all of those basis points and then work it from there. So that's kind of like the behind the desk kind of work. Sometimes it takes a long period of time to complete those DDQs. We're a small team. My partner is a nuclear engineer, so he's quite pedantic in terms of what answers he provide. And so it was kind of like a preparation review process before we kind of get information out of the firm. And then the second part is, once you get a tick in that, is the operational due diligence in terms of making sure that, you can present a team and an office, and some people want to know who sits where, and where's the tea room, where's the coffee room, whatever. To make sure that there's actually a business here. It isn't just a concept and idea of people, getting together once in a while, but there's actually a business, is an operation here. If they need to kind of go someplace to ask questions about the business, there's a premises. And so, which then obviously adds to the cost of being prepared for due diligence, in terms of now you have to kind of have an office before the time, and you need to make sure that your office is appropriately equipped, etc., etc. So, and then making sure that your team is on deck, kind of ready to play. And so I think we followed a similar process. We had a lot of dry runs for due diligence as well. I firmly believe that you sometimes win the game when you're off the field, and not necessarily when you're on the field. You must make sure that you know all your drills and all your moves. So when you get on the field, everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and they're prepared for whatever curveball comes at that point in time when they're on the field, as opposed to falling over themselves when on the field. So that's kind of like what we've done, and so far it's worked well for us. And so we kind of, I think, like I mentioned, some of the DFIs, come and see you 5-6 times with different groupings of people, because they really want to make sure that they're making a right call. Other LPs are quite comfortable just coming once and then making a call. So I think it's probably always best to be over prepared and under prepared when it comes to DDQs or due diligences.
Thanks for those insights, Mark. Yes, Jess Main and I will tell you also, it's also better to be overdressed than underdressed. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Agree with you wholeheartedly. So it's all about being prepared. And I love that, and guys, I've added it to the chat for you. That is like blue chip due diligence questionnaire that I've added in the chat for you. That is what the big international, institutional, limited partners who are looking to invest in you will ask for. So you don't have to get there, but have a look at those forms, because it gives you insight into what investors are generally looking for if they are thinking about investing into your fund. And it will give you a good sense of how you need to think about putting your due diligence data room together. And I agree with you, Mark. Do it once and make sure you keep updating that and make sure that that data room is best in class at that point in time. I want to quickly drop into some of these questions. I think a lot of them we might have answered already as we went through the discussion. You know, Keval, you asked the question on where and how to raise capital and what restrictions come with different types of investors. I think you got your answer. Google, go and look at all the different association sites, gather as much info as you can. And, you know, as a last resort, pick up the phone the organization and say, hey, I'd love to engage with you. Do you have your latest fact sheet that tells me about you? Or can you just point me in the right direction on your website as to where I might find that fact sheet about you? Avi, this is one for you. Do you think retail investor appetite has gone down since we've seen Section 12J closed down?
First of all, I mean, I wouldn't say it's gone down in general, but definitely for Section 12J, one of the biggest draw cards were we were able to package, you know, really moderate and conservative investments and show really attractive yields. And without the tax benefit, you know, there are some private investors who look at it and they want something that's more like a bond play or a little bit more exciting. But by and large, you've seen the 12J market merge and I guess use what 12J was for the retail investor as a stepping stone into a bigger space. Debt, more traditional LPs, but definitely the retail market, there's not the interest there used to be.
Got it. Okay, so what you've just sent a message out to government to find a different mechanism to get retail investors opportunity to invest. Got it? I think they heard it if they're not being load shedded. Right. Tanya, I think your question is a superb question, and I think it's probably something that everybody's going to touch on now as I ask them for closing remarks. I know there were other questions there, guys, that were much more particular to your personal or professional endeavors, which we'll respond to separately post this webinar. But I want to give, unless anybody else has a burning question, in which case there's a raise your hand function. And if I see it in the next 5 seconds, I'll allow you to ask your question. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Come and gone, like load shed, like electricity. Panelists, if there is one thought you could leave our audience with today, what would that be as they embark on their fundraising journeys? Avi, I'm going to pick on you.
Thanks, Mel. Awesome. Yeah, I guess it's going to be consistent with what I've said throughout. My piece of advice is this: know who you are. Be very clear on what you're trying to do, what you set out to achieve, and how you plan to achieve it. You'll find literally limitless benefits. You'll be much more able to filter who you want to connect with and do business with. Also, people will be able to direct you. Everything will be clear. So know your mandate, know how you plan to do things. Let that be apparent in everything that you do and how you share it. And I think there are numerous benefits there, but chopping and changing doesn't work in this space.
Authenticity, I like it. Mark.
Yeah, my advice would be to say, well, you got to believe in yourself and believe in what you're trying to do. There must be like a bigger purpose behind it, because when it starts getting tough and you do get like ghosted or stonewalled, etc., you got to have the tenacity to push through. And so you must be doing this for the right reasons. It's not easy, but when you start going, it starts getting easier. And even for the most seasoned, PE managers, they always dread, going on the road for fundraising. And so, and it might also be something that you enjoy. So, I think all of us need to be able to sell, and we're the only people that can potentially sell ourselves. So we must learn to sell.
Nobody can be a better you than you. I know that somebody said that and I've paraphrased it, but there you go, Mark. I've summed it up for you, and I love that. Nobody likes receiving a no, but it's through learning from that no's that you will reach end goal. So just face up to the no's and take the good from it.
Yeah.
Jasmine?
Fundraising is a marathon, not a sprint. So build that long distance runner tenacity. And then I'll sneak in a bonus extra point. It's relatively easier to raise your the second and third close. So on your first close, you need more grit and tenacity, but know that it's worth it because it becomes easier the more you have a track record and the more you build up our LPs. Further LPs find it easier to piggyback off the earlier due diligence the first and original LPs have done.
There you got it, guys. There you've got it. It's a marathon. Make sure you are looking after yourself in that process, because ultimately, Jasmine, you said it's all about the team, and it's all about what you as the team are accomplishing, and celebrate those accomplishments. Let people know about those accomplishments and use it as your track record. Panel, all I can say is I love these discussions because I think we sometimes forget that we're all going through similar challenges, and having people share so openly and transparently as you have today around those challenges and just sharing some of the learnings is just such a huge thing for all of us going on the journey and sometimes just needing that little boost. So I want to thank you for your presence today, and I want to particularly thank Rencell for what it's doing in this space, in this emerging manager space, and the assistance it's providing to emerging managers, and for giving us this platform today to have this discussion. And maybe I'll give Sia a quick opportunity from Rencell to just introduce herself so that those on the line today and looking to engage with Rencell can put a face to a name when they're looking to engage with Rencell to see how they can assist. Sia, over to you.
Hi Mel, how are you?
Fabulous.
I'm great, thanks. Thank you for facilitating the session today, and to the amazing panelists. Like, the insight was amazing. Just seeing everyone's journey and how it's so similar yet so different at the same time is phenomenal. And also, thank you so much to everyone who's attended today. Like, we're seeing a lot of familiar names there in the chat box. It's very exciting to see that our clients are jumping onto these webinars and that GrowVest has a global impact. We've got people from the UK, from the USA, from the rest of Africa joining in on these sessions. And that is great to see. So Mel, I've been tasked with being the fund police in this instance. So Rencell has an amazing opportunity that we are launching for first-time and emerging fund managers. What we've seen is that there's a lack of support and in the community with these first-time fund managers. So what we're doing here, with the support of GrowVest, Rencell is launching an in-person small gatherings for our emerging fund managers. So we'll be hosting these at the GrowVest offices and with about 10 to 15 people. And what we'll do for the first-time and emerging fund managers, we will get the veterans into the same room as them so that they can ask all of these questions. Because I've seen that while looking at the chat box, there's people who don't know what an LP is, how to go through the due diligence process. So we want to make this journey, like Jasmine said, is that it is a marathon. So we want to make it a bit easier, and we'll be the people that are handing you the water there on the sidelines, because I've seen, with the two oceans that have happened now, you've got those people that keep on handing the runners the water. So that's what Rencell is trying to create. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to invite everyone into the space. As I mentioned, it's very limited people. And then Henry, if you can just pull up the poll to see if the people who've joined today would be interested in being part of this exclusive event.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Sia. While that poll is running, guys, as we learn to integrate over COVID, what a wonderful opportunity to just know that you're not alone and just to learn from some of the guys in the space. Sia, thank you. Thank you for popping up on our screens and offering us that opportunity.
Always a pleasure, Mel.
Such a cool initiative. Thank you so much. It makes us look good. Thanks. Look, I think I can see what's going on in the polls, and the hands are going up. So guys, I just want to say again to our panelists, I know this takes an incredible amount of time and effort out of your day to do this. Thank you for sharing your journeys with us. Sia, thanks to you and your team for hearing our audience members and pulling out all the stops and providing this opportunity. And I guess all that is left to say is I hope we all survive load shedding. Otherwise, you know what? Our economy is going to do great on takeaways, etc. So please support that industry and then go take a run because you're going to need it if load shedding goes on for much longer. But guys, we're getting there. We're getting there slowly but surely. Thank you for hearing us out this afternoon. And as always, send us suggestions of what the next topic should be about. And let us know what you're struggling with so we can use this platform that's been provided to engage with you.
Thank you so much, Mel. Just to answer some questions that we're getting quickly, is we'll be in touch with the dates, and also a big round of applause to our marketing team. Thank you for putting this all together. And Mel, once again, thank you so much. What you do start off as, you start off as a facilitator and you end up being part of the panel, which is always amazing. The knowledge that you share with us is amazing. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and congratulations on your fundraising, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic evening.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks, team. Cheers.
Thanks, Mel.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
You send out